The decisions we make impact others. Similarly, they impact us. So how do we make decisions that take into account not only the short-term but the long-term implications for us, for our families, for our businesses, staff, clients, suppliers, all those people who are affected every time we make an important decision? How do the decisions we make align to our values or to our business objectives or our personal goals? Today, we're going to look at a simple and powerful strategy that allows us to keep all that in perspective and allows us to make our decisions in a way that they serve us not only today, but in a day from now, a month from now, and 10 years from now. I'm speaking with Suzy Welch about business performance, especially as it relates to making business decisions. Suzy is energetic, passionate, and very realistic. She was the editor of the Harvard Business Review. She's had a long and successful career as a business journalist. You may have read her column in Oprah magazine. She's a best-selling author, and to top it all off, she's a mother of 4. I interviewed Suzy about her new book. She was on the east coast of America and it was early morning. I was in Sydney, Australia, and it was very late at night. We were both working. Her book is 10-10-10, a life-transforming idea. And we talked about making important decisions, the myth about work-life balance, and women and leadership. Suzy, how did 10-10-10 come about?
It was 13 years ago, and I was a young working mother. I had 4 children under the age of 7. I was around 32 myself, and I was the senior editor at the Harvard Business Review. So I was working around 40, 50 hours a week. And my life, although it looked very, very perfect from the outside, I mean, it really looked like I had it all. I was really out of control on the inside, and it all came to a sort of a shocking end when I was invited to give a speech in Hawaii to a group of insurance executives. And I lived in Boston, and I needed to travel to Hawaii and back. I figured I could do it in 48 hours to minimize the collateral damage on the home front. And then to crack the work-life balance code, which I thought I was going to be the first woman to do that, I decided I was going to bring my 2 oldest children, who were 7 and 6 at the time. And I said to the kids, let's go on a big adventure. And I sort of whispered as an aside, Mommy's got to work, but you won't even notice that the mommy is working. And to the clients, I said, I'm going to bring 2 of my children, but you won't even notice they're there. And, it was a recipe for disaster. And in fact, disaster ensued. I got there. One of the kids got sick on the plane. The other got sick after we got there. The clients were complaining I wasn't there enough. But it really reached its pinnacle, so to speak, when as I was giving the keynote address, I was standing up on stage. I had warehoused my children cleverly in a hula dancing class on the beach. And as I looked to the back of the room towards the end of the speech, I see 2 little hula-clad bodies pressing up against the sliding glass doors at the back of the conference hall, pressing their faces up against. I can see their mouths sort of screaming, Mommy. And as I was wrapping up the speech in a incredibly quick manner, the kids, and we call it the jailbreak in the house, made a jailbreak and burst into the conference hall. And as they were running towards me, I thought to myself, oh my God, something has to change. And what changed that night when I began to really think about what I was doing wrong, what changed was how I made decisions. How I made decisions each and every time. I started off with very small decisions, and I moved on to bigger decisions. Instead of having this reactive gut or guilt or expedience, a reactive approach to decision-making, I decided to be very deliberate and intentional, taking each decision and considering its consequences in 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years.
So there is the key, the 10-10-10. But there are some steps that you recommend we take when we're looking at 10-10-10. Tell us a little bit about those.
The power of 10-10-10 comes from the process. It is a discipline. It is a process. I mean, you can use it just sort of, very casually with the sort of 10-10-10, but I really recommend you going through the full process. The first step is defining the question you want to answer. So often in messy dilemmas, we don't even know what question we're trying to get to the bottom of. And so we sort of make a stab at an answer and it slips away because it's not the real question. So the first thing is decide what you're deciding. Sometimes that's quite straightforward, but not always. Mm-hmm. The second step is to lay out all of your options, not just the obvious ones, just not the easy ones, not the expedient ones, but all of the possible options. Sort of for a moment, remove your edit button and put out all the options you would have. The next step is to look at the consequences of those options in 10 minutes. That's the immediate future. It's just directional. 10 months, the foreseeable future. And 10 years, the long-distant future, a time in which you will be living the life you want, okay? Not really, what life there will be, because we can't predict the future, but we can create the future with our actions. And each decision will either take us farther away from the future we want or closer to the future we want. And then after you do that data gathering, for lack of a better term, you move on to the third step, which is to apply your values. And really, without this third step, 10-10-10 is just a device. But if you want it to be transformative, you need to bring in this third step where you apply your values. Who am I? How do I want to live? What do I stand for? What are my priorities rank ordered? What matters to me? Who am I? And when you apply that to that data collection process, your 10-10-10 solution will emerge.
I know that a lot of the women listening are making decisions day in, day out, not only for themselves, their families, but often for staff members, for peers, for the businesses they're running. How does stress impact our ability to make sound decisions?
Stress is the great killer of rational and thoughtful and deliberate decisions. And, we're working against nature. We are hardwired to sort of fall apart under stress, or not really fall apart, but to do things that are counterproductive to good decision-making. After all, how we react to stress, that's a neurological response. And typically, back on the Savannah Plain when we were being hardwired, the best response to stress was to freeze. Because believe it or not, predators didn't go after dead quarry, and so we don't. I mean, and that's our legacy, right? And of course, we have coping mechanisms. Of course, we do, and of course, maturity helps us. But very often, we become paralyzed in stressful situations, or we take the first exit. Okay, here's stress. Let's just get out. Here's the first exit. Well, fine. Except for that's not intentional, it's not deliberate. It often leads to regret. But there can be a way to get through stressful decision-making moments with a process. I mean, it is the life, cord to get us through if we have a process, one step after another that gets us through it. And 10-10-10 is that intervention. That's why it works so well in stressful situations.
Because at that point where we don't know where to grasp, you've made it very, very simple and very, very easy to apply.
Let me just add that one of the things about it is when we're in stress, oftentimes we don't talk about what's going on in our minds, and 10-10-10 is this amazing communication tool. Because if there are other people who are involved in your decision, and when aren't there other people who are going to be impacted, you can sit with your team at work or with whatever group of people is affected by the decision at hand and say, let's 10-10-10 this together. And what it does is it surfaces assumptions and it surfaces expectations and concerns. And suddenly, instead of talking about the fear or talking about all sorts of other issues, you're talking about the problem and the solution all together on the same page with the same process. That is incredibly effective in high-stress situations.
In your chapter titled In Work Dignity, you talk about this process as being an entrepreneur's ally. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when I started writing about 10-10-10, I was using it for myself mainly in work-life issues. As I moved up on the masthead at HBR and my kids got older and in many ways more demanding, I was using it all the time to manage that intersection. But after I wrote about 10-10-10 for Oprah's magazine, I started hearing from hundreds of people who were using it in all different ways, and I found that it was a great ally to entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs make a lot of decisions on their own. Mm-hmm. And really what happens is 10-10-10 becomes like a virtual consultant. It's like having a consultant in the room. You become your own consultant instead of doing what so many entrepreneurs find themselves doing, which is making decisions on gut or having one mentor who they turn to, and then that person either verifies what they want to hear or sort of throws a curveball. But 10-10-10 gives entrepreneurs who are making investment decisions, hiring decisions, resource allocation decisions, a process. And many entrepreneurs that I've observed now, met many of them as I've traveled around working on 10-10-10 around the country, use a sort of a workshop, a workbook of 10-10-10 that they've created. One woman in San Jose created one for herself where she really writes it out. And it's like having a free consultant. I mean,
that is great.
Entrepreneurs are nothing if not inventive. I mean, they're nothing if not, always looking for ways to improve their businesses, and they don't have a lot of resources. And so here's a way to help you make decisions without, really with all you can take is just yourself and a pen, a piece of paper, a computer, and work through decisions with it.
That's fantastic. You tell a story about leadership that I want to review here, and it's a story about a difficult decision you had to make while at Harvard Business Review. And what you say about it is, I'm not sure everyone in the room agreed with my decision, but at least everyone, including me, understood why I had made it. And that's part of a leader's job.
That's right. I mean, one of the things that happens when you're using 10-10-10 as a leader, I went on to become the editor of the Harvard Business Review, and you make a ton of decisions as a leader, and what happens is your staff is watching you. Their eyes are on you, and they spend a lot of time guessing about why you're doing what you're doing. And so the story that I tell in the book is about a very emotional moment when we were trying to decide whether or not to run an article by a very high-profile Harvard professor in the magazine, and it was not an article that some people wanted to run. It was the information in it was not new, and we felt like it was being imposed on us by the faculty. And we had a discussion about our values. What did we stand for? What was the magazine becoming? How much were we willing to risk for that? And there was a great conversation around the table about the values and expectations and assumptions and needs and wants. And then we went through as a team the consequences of running and not running this article in 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years. And in the end, I made the decision that we would run with the article because of what I felt that if we didn't, and I had 10-10 to explain why, that we were giving up too much, that I was giving up my ability to do other projects that mattered more, I felt. And there I was really making my decision very transparent, having had a full airing of everyone's opinions. They heard how I was thinking and why I was thinking. And, as I said in the book, no, I don't think everyone agreed. I think probably I had two people who really disagreed, and yet there was no mystery to it. And I really felt that was one of the first times where I actually said I really did a leadership thing. I really felt confident in my leadership because I was leading transparently.
And the tool was so collaborative and yet so simple. You didn't have to do a 3-day workshop to get aligned on the idea.
Yeah.
It was
quick. My staff loved it because they love 10-10-10. We used it a lot, just like I use it all the time with them. Now my children are grown, and when we have big family decisions, we all do it because it becomes a language. And it really, there's a life coach I met not too long ago when I was on my book tour, and she uses 10-10-10 in her practice. She's a family counselor, and she calls it the great diffuser. What it does is it just stops the emotionality or it lessens it, and you start talking about the idea. And that is so freeing, and it's so efficient because really what we start talking about when we're talking to people about difficult issues is how we're talking to each other. Why do you talk to me in that tone? Why do you always say, that? And then you start remembering past hurts or past fights. Really what 10-10-10 does is it keeps you on task, and it really takes out the emotional history of every conversation you've ever had before.
Great, because we're following the process and not getting dragged into all the other things we could get dragged into that are old and emotional. I love your point of view on balance, and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your point of view because it is a little contrarian.
It is. I mean, I was giving a speech last night to a group of women in Boston, and at the end of the Q&A, a woman raised her hand and she said, I had my children now. I'm back in the workforce I need to be. My husband's job was downsized, and I am working 5 days a week. And my company doesn't care if I'm happy or not. How do I go to my boss and say to my boss, I want to work 4 days a week because I'm not happy? And I said to her, I have terrible news for you. Your company doesn't care if you're happy. You don't own your company. The shareholders do. The company cares if the shareholders are happy. Now, if your unhappiness is making you an unproductive employee, that's not a good thing. But there are, right now, especially in this economy, there are plenty of productive employees who will come and work there in your place. Sure. I mean, this is not a time where your company is going to be babysitting you and making sure you're happy. They're not responsible for it. They're responsible for the shareholders' returns. And we live in an economy which is about performance and results. And if you can work in a company where you can really deliver performance and results on 4 days a week or 3 days half-time, your company would love to have you. But your work-life balance is not guaranteed by your company. Your work-life balance is guaranteed by you and your choices. You have to make the choice about what matters to you, and then you live by the consequences. And so I said this, and she was very sad. And I could see her sad look on her face. And another woman raised her hand, and she said, maybe you should go work in the nonprofit world. And she said, well, I need the money. And I said, if you need the money, then you have to play by the rules of the people who give the money. It was a great conversation, but it's controversial.
It is controversial. However, we're living in a time right now where, actually, I'm going to say that again. Sorry, Susie.
It's okay.
I just went blank. So we'll just cut this piece out. So while it is controversial, because we are balancing, some of us are balancing family and work, others are volunteer work and communities, perhaps who don't have children. But the idea of balance and an equal distribution of your time and energy and resources, I think what you're saying is that's not the way it works.
Well, who wants 50-50? Who wants balance? Oh, maybe some people do. For those people, there are certain kinds of jobs and there's certain kinds of trade-offs. If you want perfect 50-50 balance between your work and some other portion of your life, I don't care if it's yoga or children or whatever. If you want 50-50, you're not going to be a CEO in a publicly held corporation. That's just not going to happen. That's a place where your balance is quite different, where your work is 90 and your other life is 10. But those are choices. Nobody owes, I don't believe, this is just my personal opinion, I don't believe anybody owes somebody who wants 50-50 work-life balance a free ride to the top. If you believe in meritocracy, whereas performance gets you up the ladder, which I do, and take it or leave it, I do, then if people who've made a choice that other things matter to them as much as their work are not going to progress as quickly. Doesn't mean they need to leave the company. Doesn't mean they need to go live on a commune. It just means that they're not going to move as swiftly up the ladder or up the ladder at all. But they can be productive members of the company just in different kind of roles, individual contributor roles.
And certainly from a business owner perspective, I don't know a successful business owner who hasn't put in ridiculous hours and been totally out of balance in chaos, but made the decisions at every given moment of what it was going to take to create a successful business.
If anybody understands this notion, I've noticed, it's entrepreneurs, because they leave the corporation and they end up working 100 hours a week because they are the owner, operator, shareholder, everything. And they've made this choice. No entrepreneur, true entrepreneur, goes into it sort of saying, I'm doing this for work-life balance. Otherwise, they're deluding themselves. It is entrepreneurial ventures take all of you. Now, it's interesting, you can go to a lacrosse game of one of your children and then work late at night, but you're not lessening your work, you're increasing your work. And they get it. And also entrepreneurs are very much, they employ 3 people, say, or they employ 10 people. They want all of those people the same way they put all of them in. And the last thing you want to hear when you're a boss, really, I know this is so politically incorrect to say, but when you're a boss, the last thing you want to hear is somebody come into you and say, I can't stay late today. My babysitter has got, caught a cold, and I've got it. You don't want to hear it. Either deliver or you don't want to manage the personal lives of your employees. You're managing your own personal life. And that's a hard message for women to hear. You go through a period when you first bring your, when you're trying to do it all, and you want the support of the organization, and you'll get it to a degree, but you'll never get it to the degree that you imagine in the nirvana of your mind.
Well, what you're talking about is ultimate personal responsibility.
Yes, totally personal accountability, personal responsibility. Own your life, own your decisions. That is truly, if you don't believe in controlling your own destiny and owning your decisions, then 10-10-10 is not really a great philosophy for you. This is a philosophy for people who believe that they have to take responsibility for the outcomes of their choices.
I think that could be a really perfect place to end. here, but I do want to ask you about mentoring. We're huge advocates of mentoring at the Australian Business Women's Network, and you said some very interesting things about mentors in 10-10-10. And I wanted to ask you, you've had a very successful career, and I just wanted to ask you what role mentors have played in your life. And, and for those looking for mentors, can they use this process with their mentor?
Mentoring is hugely important, but I think I've always approached it somewhat differently than the traditional way, in that I thought everyone as a mentor. I didn't feel like I needed to have one mentor or two mentors. I felt like every single person could be a mentor to me. Everybody in the world knew something I didn't. And, each person had something different that they knew. And so I found that mentors older than me, younger than me, mentors you would never expect, one of my, sister's friends, just seeking everybody's input into your life, having this attitude that everybody was a potential mentor. It is, and what happens is you just have many, many more friends. And mentors don't have to last, 5 years or 10 years. You can have a mentor for 2 weeks and learn from them. And of course, understanding that it's reciprocal. I mean, if somebody is mentoring you, you must in some way give back. What always is very difficult for young women in particular to understand is when I've been approached many times where people said, I really want you to mentor me. And, there has to be something for me in it, right? Something enjoyable, something engaging, and I mentor many young women, and the ones where it's the most successful is where they understand it's a two-way street. If I'm teaching them, there's surely something they could be teaching me. And those are the most enjoyable mentoring relationships. But you should have as many as humanly possible.
That's terrific. And you bring a good point. And that exchange for the mentor, you can't guess what that is. You need to figure out from them what it is.
Absolutely. It just puts the own. I mean, a woman said to me yesterday, or no, it wasn't yesterday. It was last week. And she said to me, I wish you would mentor me. And I remember thinking, the first thing I would say if I'd make the decision to go ahead and mentor her is, okay, well, what will I get from this? Not to be selfish, but I think you've got to learn right at the beginning that all relationships are reciprocal. All in business and in life, all relationships are reciprocal. And, if I was to mentor her, the first thing I would want to teach her is that lesson. Because if you think you're just going to take from people, your career is quite short.
Thank you so much, Suzy. It's been such a pleasure talking about this subject, which I don't know how many interviews have focused, purely on women in business, but it's just a joy.
I'll tell you. Yeah, no, I mean, I love talking about this, especially the work part of it. It's fantastic. I really enjoyed it myself, so thank you.
You're very welcome. Pleasure to meet you, and and all the best with the book.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Okay, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Suzy's book is available in bookstores. For more tips and resources to help boost your business, go to our website, abn.org.au.